Hi, welcome to Diaries. This is Tia and I'm Michelle. And on our channel, we share stories on how to build wealth through real estate. So be sure to subscribe to our channel where you can hear real stories from real investors working on real deals.
Today we're going to be talking about 5 things that we learned from our first real estate investment. So we'll jump right in.
So number one, I learned to have a closer eye on my finances. So let me tell you the story. I found this fantastic townhome in the Lodo neighborhood of Denver, which was really close to downtown. Great location, had, you know that place. It's close to all the bars and restaurants. You absolutely don't need a car there. It's really cute. It's really like a really hip part of town. It was excited, but it had some serious structural damage. But in exchange for it, it was a steal. So I mean, I got it for like 50% below what it was like the market value. So I decided to move forward with it. It was an in unit, all brick, and literally one wall was completely detached from the whole townhouse. It was a nice 1 bedroom, 1 bath townhome, and I just felt like this was it. I love this unit. I can figure out a way to fix the foundation and get this all together. So that was my first deal going in right away.
Which sounds, structural damage, that's a huge task to
take
on for your first deal.
Yeah, exactly. Looking back at it though, maybe that was my appropriate first deal. So as I got into it, one of the mistakes that I kind of made was in addition to the down payment that I placed on the townhouse, I also tapped out my emergency savings funds. And everyone knows like your emergency savings fund should be at least 3 to 6 months worth of reserve, but that was like easy available capital. So I took that money and also put it towards the townhouse because the repairs were a lot more than I thought it was going to be.
I bet.
When you realize that had structural damage and I had to jack up the wall and reinforce everything. So, we're going in there and, I had this bright idea that I also wanted to add a basement because there wasn't a basement to it too. So I had these contractors come in and start digging out this basement, and I had this conveyor belt. I was just digging up like all this dirt. I found like a cat skull down there. You'd be surprised what you find when you dig up dirt underneath your investment, So it was exciting, but it was a whole lot. And then I had to reinforce the walls, and then of course the roof had to be repaired as well too, as a result of like one of the walls being completely detached from the townhouse. So it was just a whole lot. I was kind of losing a little bit of sleep because of the fact that, okay, everything is going pretty smooth now, but if one disaster happens or one accident happens, I'm like one step away from just running out of money completely. Yeah. So, during that time, I really had to, there was these contractors here. It was this paint needed to be here. I had to pay for, permitting here. I had to pay the architect and all these things. So all these expenses were really going out. So I really had to keep a close eye on my money. Yeah. I really had to be looking at my checking account all the time. I had to be making budgets. I had to get a whole bunch of bids. And I had to really, look at, my incoming cash flow as well too, and was really trying to divvy up, here's the money that coming in from the check that I make from my job, my business, right? And this is the amount that could go into this investment. This is the amount that needs to go into my savings. This is the amount that goes to paying my bills. It really taught me to have a closer eye on my money and to better manage my funds. So that was one of the things that I learned from my first deal.
And to keep that emergency fund.
Don't spend
the emergency fund.
Don't spend the emergency fund.
For me, my first deal was totally different. I was living in California at the time. I really wanted to get into investing, and I always kind of had this desire to own multifamily properties because I was a property manager of large multifamily assets previously. And so basically I started, looking around, and everyone's telling me, hey, we're at the top of the market. Like, this isn't a good time to buy. And my parents had a bad experience back in 2007, 2008 with the crash. And so there was a lot of fear for me going into purchasing a property, but I really wanted to overcome that. I met a lot of people that gained wealth through investing in real estate, and I just decided to take that leap. And with doing that, what I decided to do was to house hack. I found this really cute single family house with an ADU above the garage. It was outside of Los Angeles, so I had to sacrifice on basically location a bit, I still picked a very nice location. It was close to a college. It had good economics in the town that I picked, but I couldn't buy that house that was right in the best neighborhood, right in, you know, the middle of Los Angeles, because it's so expensive.
Yeah, so it's pretty high.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they just think, oh my gosh, I'm buying my first house, it has to be everything that I want, you know, and that's not the case. Sometimes you got to sacrifice a little bit so you can actually get to that point where you buy that house. That's everything that you want.
You might have to settle for just 70% of what you want on your first property.
Exactly. And at the time I didn't have any children, you know, it was just me. And so what ended up happening is I rented out the front house to a family. It's 3 bedroom, 2 bath, and then I lived in the 1 bedroom, 1 bath. That's basically how I got my start. It was very low maintenance, it's new construction property, and the first thing I learned was basically how to house hack. And house hacking, for those of you that don't know, is where you rent out a portion of your property to offset your mortgage. And that's what I did.
Right.
And it really worked out.
And I think it's a safe way to go, especially for people who are maybe younger, or maybe they don't have a huge family.
Yeah.
Where instead of just buying your first house, where it be a condo or a house, you know, you think like, okay, you know, buying at a bigger price point with multiple units, because buying a duplex will probably be more expensive than buying a condo or buying a house, but it's actually less risky, because again, if something happens to you, like you lose your job, or you want to change careers, or whatever the case is, you can kind of lean on your tenants to kind of save you, and so it just keeps your cost of living really low. So it's a really great tip for people who are maybe first-time home buyers who don't really have a family yet. So that's really great.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened with me. Like, they were paying the majority of the mortgage because they were living in the house that was a 3 bedroom, 2 bath, and I was just living in the 1 bedroom. So I was only spending a couple $100s a month on my rent.
Right.
I mean, my mortgage.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And in LA, and living in LA.
Right.
You can't beat that.
Yeah.
You can't beat that. I mean, it's so smart to do that.
So the second thing that I learned was basically how to house hack.
Yeah, absolutely. So going into the third story, one thing I learned was how to hold contractors accountable. Managing and dealing with contractors is a whole nother skill set that you'll learn in your first deal. At least I learned in my first deal as well too. You want to make sure that you set the expectation up front as far as, okay, how much is this going to cost? What's the budget? I mean, there's going to be a little wiggle room in there, because there's always going to be unexpected things. Yeah. But what's going to be the timeline? So you really want to do that. And then you just can't take any contractors for their word. I met some great contractors, and I met some not so great contractors. I had contractors that didn't show. Starting with my townhome, I originally was thinking that my townhome was going to be done in 8 weeks. That was so far from the truth. It went from 8 weeks to actually 4 months it took to actually do that deal. So, you know, towards the end is when I was really like, okay, I need to hold my contractors accountable. So it may be something where you really need to go to that property more than just once a week, maybe even every day, especially when you're getting to know a new contractor, to know their work. You know, you want to look at, you know, their previous work, their past clients, what they've done before in the past. And so it's really going to take a lot of accountability, a lot of communication, and touching base with your contractors, not, you know, paying them up front for business, for maybe pay for material but not pay up front for some of the work. So there's a couple of tactics that we could talk in a separate video on best tactics on working with contractors and how to find great contractors. But that was one thing I learned, you know, from my first deal, was how to hold the contractors accountable and manage contractors.
And it's so important. Oh my gosh. Like, you know, I can definitely touch on that in my, you know, experiences with renovating and remodeling properties. It's so important to have a timeline with them, and then also to have a schedule for payment, so that coincides, so that you guys are both on the same page about the goals. Like you said, you thought it was gonna be 8 weeks, it turns out to 4 months. Right? Like, how?
Right. Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
So
that was a first investment deal mistake learned, you know.
And we've done it. I've done it too.
Yeah, exactly.
So definitely hold them accountable. And then you kind of mentioned too on just having like that reserve.
Yeah.
You know, and accounting for that too.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the fourth thing that I actually learned, you know, from my first deal was how to manage tenants. And I had a previous, you know, background in property management, so I was familiar with them. But when you're house hacking and you live so close to your tenants, there's a couple of things that you really need to just set in place. One is you want to screen your tenants, do a background check on them, a reference check. I mean, these are going to be your neighbors or potentially living in a portion of your house. So you definitely want to screen them. I also learned just to be very open with them and be more proactive about maintenance. I think a lot of times as landlords we're like, oh my gosh, we don't want them to call us about anything. But really, if you open that door and say, hey, if there's something going on, let me know. You know, they're gonna let you know before it becomes a bigger issue. And lastly, I learned how to set boundaries with tenants. So like I said, this is your neighbor, they're living in your basement, they're living in your attic, they're living behind you, they're living next to you, you know. And so at any time, and people will do this, your tenants will call you at random hours, they might show up at your door if something's going on, and so immediately you want to be friendly with them, but set the boundary that you are not friends with them. For me, what was really helpful is to only allow them to email me unless it was an emergency, you know, flood, fire, the building's burning down, someone's dying. I mean, they didn't take offense to it. It was just like, hey, just send me an email with a picture explaining what's going on, and that really allowed me to manage when I responded to them. You know, and I would always get back with them within 24 to 48 hours. And so we end up having a very good relationship. But the fourth thing that I learned was how to manage tenants.
For your first investment property, most people on their first deal typically will manage their own property and not hire a property manager. So you do get to, you know, learn how to deal with tenants. And of course, as you get more and more units, you know, I personally use a property manager, but on my first rentals, I did manage them myself. So yeah, I learned a lot about working with tenants, for sure.
And people will knock on your door at any time.
Especially if you live there.
They will call you
so
at
your house hacking.
Yes.
You're living with those tenants, you know. Yeah, exactly. I never lived with my tenants, but if you're house hacking, yes, it's, you got to create that boundary somehow.
You have to.
Yeah. Number 5, that the thing that we learned from our first deal was that real estate investing is worthwhile. It really is. I mean, like, you know, I think, you know, we've made a lot of mistakes in which we'll talk about in another video, but I would say just from all the things that I've learned from my first deal, the people that I've met, learning how to do contractors, how to manage my money, and of course, when I sold the deal, I made a good amount of profit. So that's always a bonus. And then, you know, even with like owning rentals, owning those assets, I would say it's definitely worthwhile. I mean, even from the smallest level, whether you only just get one property or if you end up getting like 200 more units or you get 5,000 units of a syndication or a fund, it was addicting. It just made me want to buy more real estate properties. So it's definitely was worth it. That's one thing I learned about it, was real estate investing is definitely worth it.
Yeah, I would say for me, absolutely. I put such a little amount into it that literally after holding it for, I think it was 3 or 4 years, you know, I was able to come out of that with a huge down payment for actual commercial property. I was able to put 3.5% down on this property and then go into another property and be able to put the 25% down. Right? Without that property, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So I 100%, you know, think that at the end of the day, regardless of what's holding you back, it's worth it to really look into it and to explore it and to get over the idea of the paperwork and the tenants and just go after it, because there's no other place that you can make this type of money. Bonus tip for staying for the end of the video. Basically, a lot of people don't know that when you're investing into multifamily, you can do a lower down payment loan to get started. And so some of the ways that you can do that, there are conventional loans that you could potentially use, non-conforming loans, VA, and FHA loans. And all of those will allow you to do a lower down payment on properties that you could potentially house hack. For instance, you could do 3 to 5% down when the standard investment is 20%, right? Now you do have to pay the PMI, but there are loans for everyone that you know is looking to do this that they can do with a lower down payment.
Right. And the key thing is that if you're going to reside there, so if you're going to take it as your primary residence and live in one of the units, which is the definition of house hacking, you can get away with putting a lower down payment. So that's a really good tip, especially for maybe like first time home buyers. If you want to get started in investing and you don't mind living in one of the units at least for a year, it has to be a year, right? It
has to be a year. And you could do, like, for instance, you could do a single family home, for instance, a mother-in-law suite in the basement or an ADU, or you potentially do a multifamily 2 to 4 units as well. 2 to 4 unit multifamily units do qualify for a lot of the lower down payment loans.
Right, exactly. And the key thing is that you're not necessarily going to cash flow a great deal. You know, as far as when we mean by cash flow, I mean like monthly profit that's coming in after all your expenses. The whole idea of is for you to get started. So you can at least get started in your portfolio by owning more than one unit just by one step by house hacking. So I think that's a really great deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you're looking to start your journey in real estate investing and are looking for a real estate professional that actually specializes in investments, go to our website and we'll connect you with the right person in your area so that way you can get started and create your own stories.
Love it.
Yes. That's great.